and that's used to educate and build partnerships. We want to gain the support of community leaders and non-governmental organizations that will help give us more influence with our elected officials. The media is another lever, and we want to engage and influence the media. We write letters to the editors and op-eds, and we've got 2 people who've recently had letters to the editor published in our Detroit Free Press recently. We meet with editorial boards. We work to place stories in all forms of media. Matt coordinates all our social media stuff, so we need to get the word out. Grassroots is an event we're doing now. It can be as a constituent, writing to your senators and representatives and letting them know what things you're in favor of. We can do this by tabling at assorted events when we're not suffering a pandemic. We do presentations such as something like this to educate people, to persuade them, to build goodwill. And group development is we need to grow the group, we need to manage volunteers, we need to onboard new volunteers, and we like to have fun too. This all works together in lobbying Congress, so people who work in grass tops and grassroots outreach and media and lobbying, and that all helps create change in our government. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Matt. Let me unshare my, and this is always.
I do want to make just a quick mention before Matt starts screening. My name is Annalicia, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and joining us. Normally, for our newcomers, we meet as a group at the Birmingham Unitarian Church in Bloomfield Hills off of Woodward every 3rd Tuesday of the month. But recently, we've been doing all our meetings through Zoom. So I hope in the next 3 weeks here, you're able to join us for our next meeting. So yeah, we're going to be screening Dr. Katharine Hayhoe's virtual Earth Day keynote address, which was originally screened on Earth Day. But we really enjoyed her message a lot, so we're rescreening it for the chapter. And because it was pre-recorded, there are some features during the presentation that won't be available. Like she mentions going to pollev.com. So just keep in mind you don't have to do that. And then let's see. Oh yes, and then we are recording this this presentation as well, and we're going to put it on YouTube. And there was a few people that were interested in coming that couldn't make it, so we'd like to also make it available for those people as well. So
great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Annalicia. Yeah, it was good to mention that bit about the polls and all that. So let me get this up and running here. Okay, and hopefully the sound will work.
Everybody, welcome to the Citizens Climate Lobby Virtual Earth Day. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm the Executive Director for Citizens Climate Lobby. So there are 3,878 people who've registered for this event. Some of you will be watching live, some of you will be watching from the recording. That includes every single state in the US and the District of Columbia. That includes people from countries that include Australia, Belgium, Canada, Costa Rica, Ethiopia, Egypt, France, Gambia, Germany, Japan, Mexico, New Zealand, Norway, Peru, and the United Kingdom. So welcome to all of you. In particular, I'd like to say welcome to those of you who are new to Citizens Climate Lobby. We are a grassroots, nonpartisan, nonprofit committed to creating the political will for a livable world. but it's also possible that we are the most extremist revolutionary group you've ever met, because we are committed to working in the space we call the far middle. I think people are very familiar with the far left and the far right, but we believe that durable, long-lasting solutions happen with solutions that can appeal to both sides of the political spectrum. And so we work in a place that we call the far middle. Here's what's going to happen today. In just a moment, I'll be introducing Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, and she'll be speaking for a while. After that, there'll be a short break where you'll get a chance to take an action if you like, and then there'll be breakout sessions that you can attend based on your interest. Our Earth Day will end at the end of those breakout sessions, so we won't be coming back and bringing everybody back together at the end. So soon, our June conference will open for registration. So many of you know for the last 10 years, we've actually gone to Washington, D.C. to hold a carbon-based thematically. We will come to work after that. There may be a chance in the Q&A to answer additional questions. Okay, so our guest today, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe. Katharine Hayhoe is the most frequently requested guest we have. She is the only person that's ever spoken on our international conference twice as the keynote speaker. She's spoken at many regional conferences, both in the US and Canada, both live and remotely like she is today. She's recorded quite a few sessions for us to help train us in communicating on climate change, including, I think, the best thing I've ever seen on media interactions. Still, with all those presentations, my favorite by far was the first time Katharine joined us, which was in November of 2011. We weren't on Zoom yet. It was by phone. And there were two things that really jump out at me about that day. First of all, Katharine's son was still quite young, and her husband was supposed to be watching him, but he was ill. So if you were listening very carefully, you could hear Dr. Hayhoe answer a question and then say something softly like, "Go eat your snack now." So it was really, it was so great. But the second thing, and this was more dramatic and important, I had believed that the only way you could come to climate change up until then was through science. And it was absolutely jaw-dropping for me, for Katharine to show us the millions of people who wanted to come to this issue through their faith. And that broadened from there. So first when we said, oh, people could come based on their faith, we started to realize people could come from wherever they are. And it was a complete game change for us as an organization to understand that we wanted to meet people where they were, not where necessarily we were. And then the last thing, Katharine, I just want to say before I turn it over to you is, it was really nice getting a note from your assistant, Laura, saying, on this Earth Day, it's so nice to add something to Katharine's calendar instead of to take something off. So Katharine, so great to have you here, and thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Mark, we have known each other a long time. I have known CCL a long time. Didn't realize quite how long until you said that, but it nearly brought tears to my eyes. I love the fact that CCL is such an inclusive organization, that it will welcome people from wherever they're at and really truly show people how whoever we already are is the perfect person to care about climate change. So today I didn't have to arrange snacks for my son. I had to tell him to stop streaming on Twitch so that he wasn't dominating the internet. And we will be talking together, all of us. So just a second here. Let me start my slides and share them with you. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having a conversation. Here we go. We're going to be having a conversation together, thanks to the miracles of the internet and Poll Everywhere. So here we go, just a second, play from start. So if you haven't already seen this in the chat, what you want to do on your computer, since you have your computer open or you have your phone open, is go to pollev.com. That's POLLEV.com and enter Texas Tech, all one word. If it asks you for your name, you don't have to worry about that. Anonymous is fine. So POLLEV.com, enter Texas Tech. This works from anywhere in the world, doesn't matter where you are. And the very first question is going to be here, and that is, go ahead and give us a dot for where you are physically located today. I see a lot of people popping up in the US, but we've got Hawaii, Alaska, Colombia, Canada, we've got Norway, we've got, wow, my geography is not so good. Is that the Philippines way over there? somewhere way over in the Pacific Ocean, which is awesome. Oh, we've got somebody in Russia. Okay, we've got a few people up in the Arctic, somewhere in the ice pack there. Maybe your fingers aren't as precise. And we've got Peru there too. We've got a few in Central America. That's awesome. We've got a few people in boats in the middle of the ocean down in Antarctica. That's also fantastic. One off Madagascar. Oh, that just disappeared. Okay, New Zealand. Awesome. The UK, France, Germany, Italy. Another on the ice in the Arctic. This is fantastic. Okay, now here's your second question. Ready? Second question. Do you remember the original Earth Day? Earth what? I wasn't born yet. I barely remember it, and I was there. Okay, my own answer is B, just for full disclosure on that one. But wow, we have 20% of people online were there. That's amazing. All right, 20% were there, 30% barely remember it, so that means 50% of you are over the age of 50. Doing them quickly. 40% of us were not born, and a few of us are not even knowing what that is. All right, let me introduce you to what that is. Earth Day began 50 years ago, and it is a celebration of basically this planet that we live on. Interestingly, if you go to Google, I love going to Google for definitions. If you go to Google, it defines an environmentalist as a person who is concerned with or advocates for the protection of the environment. Now, under this definition in Google, it gives us a bunch of words. So words that are commonly associated with environmentalists. But before I show you these words from Google, I want to ask you, if you had to summarize an environmentalist in one word, just one word, what would it be? Now, if you're going to cheat a little bit, you can use a dot or a dash to connect multiple words. Like if you want to say tree hugger, you could say tree dot hugger. Exactly, just like that. But if you had to define environmentalist in one word, what would you use? This is awesome. The bigger the word, the more people have said that word. And I love the huge variety here. So caring and steward is at the top, but we've also got passionate conservationist scientist. I love that one. Sustainability, that's easier to pronounce. Earth lover, that's a good one. Having compassion, caring, being a naturalist, empathetic, conservationist, responsible, connected. Yes. These are all words that we associate with caring for our planet. Here are the first set of words that you see under environmentalist. And with these polls, I have to apologize because my limit is 700 people, and I know we're reaching the 700 limit very quickly. In the words that Google comes up with on the first row are conservationist, preservationist, ecologist, green, and nature lover. These are words that we saw. But then there's a second row. And here's the second row from Google. Ready? Eco-activist, eco-nut, eco-freak, and tree hugger. And then when I Googled environmentalist, these are the pictures that showed up. These are the first 8 pictures that showed up. So what does this communicate to us subtly an environmentalist is? Well, first of all, it communicates that an environmentalist is male, not female. We've just got one female here, and it's Rachel Carson. Second of all, it communicates to us that most environmentalists are dead. Yes, no, Al Gore and Bill McKibben are still very much alive, I'm happy to say, but the majority of people on this list are dead. And it also suggests that to be a good environmentalist, it helps if you have a really big beard. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 50% of them have very large facial hair. So if you are a old white man, possibly dead with a very large beard, then you meet the stereotype of an environmentalist. But what if we aren't? And we don't. So when I Googled a picture of environmentalist, this was the first one that came up, and it sort of restored my soul. So I clicked on it, and here's what it said. This is very interesting. It said, the problem is that environmentalism has been successfully cast as a fringe concern. rather than the basic universal right of every man, woman, and child to have a safe and healthy air, water, food, land, sea, and natural places. Not to mention economies based on security and sustainability rather than corporate profit and destruction. Yes. So when it comes to Earth Day, to the planet, to environmentalism, to climate change, the first most dangerous myth we've bought into is that only certain type of people care. And the variant we're looking at today, the most dangerous one, is that somehow if we come from a certain part of the political spectrum, what is happening to our planet doesn't matter to us. As if we'd be able to float around in outer space without even the resources that our planet provides. Of course we do that. No matter who we are, no matter where we live, no matter what part of the political spectrum we're from, no matter what country we're from, no matter what language we speak, we all live on this planet. And this planet supplies all of the air we breathe, all of the water we drink, all of the food that we eat, all of the materials that we use that provide everything we have. We also depend on this planet, not just for the goods and the services, as well as the resources that keep us alive. We depend on this planet for its beauty as well. And that beauty is what feeds our soul, especially in these days. So if I were going to define environmentalist, I would put a big red X through all of the definitions that Google gives us. I would simply say an environmentalist is a human who lives on planet Earth. Now, we all know that there have been books and movies about people going to live on other planets. And we know that there's even a bunch of astronauts who are planning to go to Mars. 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I had the privilege of being in the front row at one of the very last talks that Stephen Hawking gave before he passed away. It was at a science festival called Starmus, where I was also one of the speakers. And I got to sit there in the front row with my son also and hear him talk about climate change. And he said, as he often did before he passed away, that climate change is the most existential threat facing us today. But then he said something that had me saying, what? He said, and that's why we may need to terraform Mars. And I thought to myself, no, there is no way that we are going to be physically able to terraform Mars before climate change overwhelms our society. There is just no way. And even if we were able to send some people to Mars, it would just be a few people. The rest of us would be left behind. So 2 days later, in my session, I was speaking with Lord Martin Rees, who you can see here, who is the Royal Astronomer of England and actually a close friend of Hawking's as well. So as we were backstage together before we went on stage, and as they were putting different colored pieces of tape on our laptops because we had the exact same laptop, I turned to him, I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? And this man is one of my personal heroes because my own undergraduate degree is in astrophysics, and he made most stunning discoveries early in the days regarding the things that I study, regarding black holes and quasars and things like that. Anyway, so I turned to him and I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? He said, certainly. So I said, do you agree with what Stephen Hawking said that, you know, we might have to terraform Mars to escape climate change? And he said, absolutely not. And I'm not gonna try to reproduce his accent because I'm not good at them, but he said it in a wonderful accent too. He said, absolutely not. Fixing climate change is a dawdle in the park compared to terraforming Mars. The truth is, to care about the health of our planet, we only have to be one thing, and that is a human who calls it home, and we are all that. What is the second most dangerous myth we've bought into? It's the myth that issues like habitat loss, biodiversity loss, deforestation, pollution, and climate change are distant issues. They only affect people who live far away from us or future generations, or they affect people who care about those types of things like the eco-nuts and the tree huggers, but not people like us who care about a stable economy and security and things like that. This is the second greatest myth we've bought into. And if you've heard me speak, you might have seen me show these maps before, but I'm going to show them again because they make the point so clearly. These maps are from the Yale program on climate communication. They show every county in the United States, but they have these maps for Canada as well. And honestly, they've done surveys for other countries, and we see the same thing in other countries too, because humans are humans. But I'll just show it from the US specifically here. Anywhere that is orange means more than 50% of people answered yes to the question. Anywhere that's blue is less than 50%, and the darker the color, the more extreme the answer in either direction. So do you think the planet is warming? Most of the US is orange. Do you think that it matters to future generations? People say yes. How about plants and animals? Certainly. How about people in developing countries? Still mostly orange. How about people who live in the United States? Oh, we're getting a lot more blue here now. And then this one is the kicker. Do you think it matters to you? We don't think it matters to us. We think it matters to the polar bear. We think it matters to people who live far away from us, but we don't think it matters to us. And the truth is that our impact on the health of our planet is already affecting us here and now. There's a concept called planetary boundaries. It was created about 10 years ago, and it shows all the different ways that we are pushing the boundaries of the ability of our planet to sustain not only all nearly 8 billion of us, but all of the other animal and plant species that share this planet with us. And you can see that climate change is already up to the increasing risk zone. But what is beyond increasing risk into high risk is biospheric integrity, the integrity of our biosphere. And this relates directly to the pandemic that we find ourselves in today. A World Wildlife Federation report by the Italian chapter was released the second week of March this year, right when the pandemic was sweeping across the country of Italy. What was it talking about? It was talking about the integrity of our biosphere. The fact that as we destroy natural habitat, as we encroach and infringe on ecosystems, the chances of viruses passing from animal to human populations through a process known as zoonosis is increased. And climate change adds in there too by affecting the supply of animals' food, by affecting where they can live, by affecting how they have to migrate. So this report talked about how the destruction of natural ecosystems, the illegal trade in wild species, and the unhygienic conditions under which we have wild domestic species of animals all contributes to the fact that viruses can jump from animal to human populations. And they concluded that conserving and maintaining nature and the benefits it provides is essential for what? For our health and our well-being. They had this helpful infographic that shows how deforestation, cutting down trees, which also produces heat-trapping gas emissions, collecting and trafficking wild species, animal market, all increases the risk of these viruses jumping from human to animal populations. Our health is at the center of the risks posed by pushing our planetary boundaries. There's more. When we extract our coal by cutting the tops off mountains, why? Because it's the cheapest way to do it. Cheapest for who? Cheapest for the companies that reap the profits. As my friend Marianne Hitt wrote a number of years ago, mountaintop removal coal mining is not the cheapest for the people who actually live and work there. It is poisoning their waterways. It allows toxic heavy metals to leak into local water supply, increasing the risk of cancer, heart disease, kidney disease, birth defects, premature mortality, and more. We all know the ecological impact of oil spills that happen in our backyard, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. But oil spills are so endemic in places like the Niger Delta in Nigeria that there is article after article after article on how the extraction of fossil fuels is just the extraction. We're not even talking about climate change or air pollution. Just the extraction of fossil fuels is affecting the unborn, it's affecting babies, it's affecting children, it's affecting maternal health. In fact, there's so many studies on this one specific area that there is an entire Wikipedia entry on, and here's the thing, they call it environmental issues, but it's all about what? Our health. Then there's the issues of deforestation and the issues of air pollution. When we burn fossil fuels, it pollutes our air. 4 years ago, a study was released showing how air pollution kills more than 5 million people around the world every year, but that was updated just last year. It turns out that air pollution kills almost 9 million people around the world. The majority of that is from fossil fuels, but in a lot of poor countries, there are also a significant number of deaths from burning brush and dung and other organic material inside the house to cook with. Air pollution is not an equal opportunity killer. It disproportionately affects people who live in the poorest neighborhoods right here in North America, as well as in countries around the world. In the United States, 200,000 people die from air pollution, which is primarily from fossil fuels in the US every year, 200,000 people. Who are those people? Those people are the people who already suffer from socioeconomic inequality, from injustice, from lack of access to basic health care, from the inability to live places that are safer with cleaner air. What's the connection to the pandemic? Well, for example, in Chicago, 30% of the population is African American. 60% of the deaths are African American. We know that people who live in areas that are already subject to terrible air pollution are much more vulnerable to be getting really sick from and even dying from the coronavirus pandemic. So this brand new research that just came out shows that 80% of the deaths across 4 different countries from coronavirus happen in areas where people's lungs were already weakened from what? From air pollution. Now, the slightly positive news, I'm not going to call it good news because I don't think there is any good news these days, but the slightly positive news, though, is that as the economic slowdown has rolled around the world, we have seen significant reductions in air pollution. And it's estimated that in the most polluted areas in the world, like in central China here, where you can see the massive reduction in air pollution, it could be that these reductions in air pollution have saved as many or more lives as were actually lost by the pandemic. Air pollution is the silent killer that has been with us for decades and even centuries. But climate change is what? Climate change is a threat multiplier. This term comes from the US military. Climate change takes all of the issues we already care about today, including our health, including air pollution, including biodiversity loss, including deforestation, including all of these issues, lack of access to clean water and food and basic health care, and it exacerbates them or makes them worse. The United Nations has 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These are very basic goals. Eliminating poverty, hunger, providing good health and quality education, gender equality, clean water, sanitation, affordable clean energy, decent work. These are very basic goals. Number 13, down in the very bottom corner there, the green one down there, number 13 is climate action. But you know what? I don't think climate action should even be on this list at all. And you might be saying, what are you talking about, Katharine? You're a climate scientist. Yes, I am a climate scientist. And because I know that the only reason we care about climate change is because it is a threat multiplier, I don't think it should be on this list at all. I think it should be an overarching kind of banner on the whole list. Because the only reason we care about climate change is because it affects poverty. It exacerbates poverty, it exacerbates hunger. It impacts our health. It disrupts economies such that people are not able to access basic education. Women and children suffer disproportionately the impacts of a changing climate. It pollutes our water through increasing runoff from heavy precipitation events. Climate change is the threat multiplier. Fixing climate change fixes these things too, and that's why we care about it. Now, just a reminder, the answer is not to turn everything off like we've seen today, because the solution today are not sustainable. Throwing people out of work so they can't feed their families, children can't go to school, industry is shuttered. That is not a sustainable solution. The reason why our global population has increased to almost 8 billion people today, the reason why our life expectancy has doubled from 40 years to 80 years in just the last 200 years. Yeah, so half of the people on this call would not be on this call if it was 200 years ago. The reason why is because of energy, because we figured out how to dig up coal and then later natural gas and oil to power our society. It has brought us the technologies that transform our world, from medical advances to transportation to smartphones. And even more importantly, it has replaced massive amounts of animal labor, of human labor, and even of slave labor. The fact that the north of the United States was able to industrialize actually played a big role in the fact that they were able to support the freedom of slaves, and they were able to win out over the South. Industrialization in Britain also contributed significantly to the abolition movement. So fossil fuels have brought us untold benefits. And if you want more, I recommend reading this, a lot of the work that Jean-Francois Mouhot has written. They've brought us untold benefits. They have increased our life expectancy. The lighter the color here, the longer our life expectancy. They've increased our life expectancy significantly. So when we look at poor areas like Central Africa, and when we see that those areas also suffer from hunger, they also suffer from poverty, they also suffer from energy poverty, we often think, well, what's the solution? The solution is we need sustainable energy sources. If our energy continues to come from fossil fuels, it's not the end of the planet, but it might be the end of civilization as we know it. Because our entire civilization is built on the assumption of a stable climate, but today it's changing faster than any time in the history of our civilization. And we will not be able to adapt if we don't eliminate our fossil fuel emissions. What is the solution? The solution is not to return to the Stone Age, to some type of utopia where 8 billion of us all live off the land. We just can't do that today. Rather, the solution the solution is not to just shut down the economy as we've seen in the last few weeks. This is a Twitter thread I have. If you're interested in more details, check it out, where I talk about how, yes, our carbon emissions have decreased, but as the pandemic passes, they're going to ramp right back up again because they were not achieved through sustainable means. They were achieved through shutting down the economy, through throwing people out of work, and those solutions are not sustainable. What are sustainable solutions? Sustainable solutions are to use our energy much more efficiently, be much less wasteful, and to figure out how to get our energy from other sources. Like what? Well, for example, on energy efficiency, we have a long way to go. Did you know that the United States is 13 out of 16? You all from Germany, I know there's a few people from Germany on the call, you won the World Cup in energy efficiency. Energy efficiency improvements are the things that people really never think about that much. They're not that exciting, but it turns out they can take us a long way. Here in the United States, efficiency improvements could cut heat trapping gas emissions in half by 2050. Pretty amazing. Why are we so wasteful? Because we're not paying the right price for our energy. Put an asterisk on that thought because we're going to come back to it, but that's why we're so wasteful. Speaking of socioeconomic inequality, how would efficiency help? It would save people money. These are the estimated savings in people's electricity bills for low-income houses or households across the United States alone. But then there's also sources of energy, like what? Like the energy we get from the sun, for example. Now, people often say, okay, sure, solar energy, but it would take up so much space. Really? Turns out not. These squares show how big a solar farm in the Sahara Desert would have to be in order to supply the entire world, just the EU, and then other smaller areas. People I put this on Twitter back in January. I said, people worry about how much land we'd need to supply the US with clean energy. Well, it turns out that I calculated the area, and so did Elon Musk separately, and we came up with something roughly comparable to what? To the area we use, and I'll zoom in on the map here, the area we currently use to grow maple syrup. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm Canadian. Maple syrup is very important. Maple syrup or golf courses. Okay, maybe we could turn a couple of those solar fields. Isn't this interesting? It's not a land use area. And Elon Musk replied, he said, good analysis, a little bit conservative. I think we could do better than that. So for the entire US, this is the size of the square, right where I live in Lubbock, Texas. This is the size of the square we'd have to have of solar panels to supply the entire country. But solar's not the only answer. We've got lots of wind. This is our wind energy potential. And here in Texas, we have more energy than any other country in the world. And there's a lot of other different ways to get our energy. Up in the Arctic, they're getting it from hydrokinetic power in streams. In Canada, 60% of our electricity comes from hydropower, and we have the potential to supply all of our electricity from hydropower. And Project Drawdown, which you may not be familiar with, but it is awesome. Project Drawdown lists all kinds of solutions, and I love the practical examples that I have run into. So Ball State University powering itself with geothermal power, the Renewable Energy Group in Iowa taking waste products and turning them into biodiesel, and even new, creative, much safer, much cheaper nuclear technology like NuScale that is building small modular reactors. Check these out if you want more information about them. But the bottom line is that it's been 6 years since fossil fuels lost the race against renewables. In 2014, more clean energy was being installed around the world than new fossil fuels. Today, we're at 70 to 30. And I love how it's happening in unexpected places and unexpected ways. So why isn't it happening faster? Because the ball is already rolling downhill. We just have to get it going faster. One of the biggest reasons is that we are not paying the true price for fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are subsidized to the tune of more than the Pentagon's budget in the United States and 10 times what the country spends on education. And this is not just a North American issue, it is subsidized around the world. These are the subsidies on fossil fuels per person around the world. We are not paying the right price for our energy. And that is why the ball is not moving as fast as it should. And that is why, as Mark said, nearly every economist in the world, including the two who won the Nobel Prize for Economics 2 years ago, support putting a price on carbon. It's because it levels the playing field. It is a free market approach. It's supported by countries all around the world. My home of Canada has a national price on carbon now, as well as many other countries in the world, like Kazakhstan and the Ukraine. Yes, and China even has a price as well. And it's supported by conservative organizations too. Bush-era Republicans, even most of the big oil and gas companies operate with a shadow price on carbon today. That is the #1 step that would level the market and help these solutions happen faster. I want to show you these maps as just one example, and get your questions ready because we are going to go there, and I'm going to ask you one more question before we go there too. Here's a map, and this is just the United States. I apologize for being so US-centric here, but you can see this in other countries as well. Here is, by county, the cheapest source of new electricity. If you're going to build new electricity, the cheapest source in the West and East is currently natural gas, that's orange. In parts of the country, even Minnesota and Wisconsin, it's solar, that's purple. And then all down through the middle of the country, it's wind, that is green. What happens if we put a price on carbon? If you have a $50 a ton price on carbon, this is how the map changes. And if you have a $100 price on carbon, this is how the map changes. This is how a price on carbon works. It accelerates the positive, beneficial, clean solutions that do not pollute our air, they do not pollute our water, they provide more jobs than fossil fuels already today, and they continue to supply the energy that we need to continue to thrive. The bottom line is this: the planet's health is our health. We care about climate change because it is multiplying all of the threats we already care about today, including those on our health and that of the planet. Climate action is action for the health of the planet and for the human race. And that's why it doesn't matter who we are, where we live, what language we speak, where we fall on the political spectrum. Because the pandemic has taught us that when it really comes down to it, what matters is our health and safety and that of our loved ones, our family, our friends, our communities, our country. That is what the pandemic threatens, and that is exactly what climate change threatens too. And that is why, to care about a changing climate, we don't have to be anything other than a human who lives on planet Earth. So what can we do? As you know, if you see my TED Talk, and if you haven't, you should watch it. Talking about climate change is the single most important thing we can do, not beginning the conversation with things we disagree on, but beginning by bonding over values that we truly share, connecting the dots to climate change, and then talking about positive, beneficial solutions that really work. So here's my last question to you. Ready? My last question to you is this: why do you care about climate change, about Earth Day, about our planet? Because you are a what? I didn't know that dogs had thumbs so they could type, but I'm always impressed to learn that. I love these answers. Why do you care? Because you're a scout, because you're a Catholic or a Christian, because you're young, because you're old, because you're a parent or a grandparent, a daughter or a child, because it's your future, because you're an earthling, because you are, and I love that this is the number one word, because you are a human. Don't worry, I'm going to snapshot this. I'm going to put it on Twitter. So if you find me on Twitter, you can find this figure here because I love it. We care because of who we are, and we are all that, right? Thank you so much. It has been fantastic talking to you. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to take your questions, and what you have to do is you have to type the question in. Don't worry about dots or dashes. You can type a whole question in. If you saw another person's question in the Q&A, you can type that one in instead. And here's the cool thing. You can upvote the questions that you want me to answer. Now, unfortunately here, I think we're still seeing answers from the previous question. You can upvote the questions you want me to answer because we don't have too much time together. I would love to spend hours with you if I could. We don't have too much time together. So instead, I'm going to answer the questions that you upvote with the most votes, okay? So type in your whole question here. If you see a question over in the QA that you really like, go ahead and type that one in here too. It doesn't have to be your question. And then also go ahead and upvote the questions that you want me to answer most. Okay.
Great. And Katharine,
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing, astonishing, fantastic, clear, everything. Before we get to that question, can you answer what lessons can we learn from our response to the coronavirus that we might apply to climate change?
Yes, that's perfect, because it gives everybody a chance to read these questions and vote. What lessons are we learning from the pandemic? Well, my last slide addressed that partially, and that is that when it all comes down to it, what really matters to all of us is the same. But we've also learned some other really important lessons. That our tendency to think it doesn't matter to us, it matters to people on the other side of the world or people who don't care about the same things as us, we radically underestimate the risks. We need to listen to the experts and the scientists. When they say there is a risk, we need to take action. And you know what? When we do take action, it works. It can make a difference. So we have seen the climate crisis almost unfold in real time with the pandemic. The pandemic spreads, of course, over days to weeks, whereas climate change impacts us over years to decades. But it's as if we're seeing in a microcosm a speeded up version of what happens if we do and do not heed the warnings that science is telling us. We are all at risk. Pandemics and climate change do not differentiate between us depending on whether we think they're real or not. But there are positive actionable solutions that we can all take to make a difference. And for climate change, it all begins with using our voice to advocate for change at every level. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Looks like there's time to take one more question here, Katharine. So do you want to take the top one or you want to pick one of those top
Okay,
ones?
I can be super fast. I'm going to
Okay.
zip through here. How do we store solar energy? Batteries are making great strides, but there's also very old-fashioned ways to store it, like pumping water uphill and then letting it go down. What's the one most important thing I can do today? Have a conversation about why climate change matters and what we can do to fix it. How do I communicate to fellow Christians who are concerned about poverty and racism? Well, that's exactly why we care. If you care about poverty, you care about climate change. If you care about racism, you care about climate change. It is a threat multiplier that makes them worse. And how do we have climate conversations right now with the stress of the pandemic? We do so acknowledging the fear and the anxiety and the uncertainty that we're all facing. But more than ever, it is essential to talk about the positive solutions that there are that we can all engage with that would make our world a place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katharine. Just really, really appreciate you making yourself available. So thrilled that this worked out. And thank you so much for this and for everything you've done for us and for the planet.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the video. We had a great little chat thread going on while we were watching. So now we'd like to just open it up for discussion and any questions. Well, first off, does anybody have any questions about anything in the video that they'd like to ask?
And feel free to unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, don't forget that. And you can also use the chat function as well if you'd like to ask a question that way. Let's see. Karen, I actually had a question for you about you mentioned that that Michigan, or you were looking for solar for your church, and did you mean that Michigan only had to increase by 15% versus California?
Yes, yes, amazingly. People always say we can't do it here, and our church has, no trees in the way and that kind of stuff. But it really, and I mean, in my mind, we have a lot of cloudy days, but in reality, we would have enough to do our church by only increasing over 15%. And the thing I found very interesting was that if it's 90 degrees and sunny, the solar power creation is not as efficient. Mm-hmm. And so that, so you think Arizona and Florida and Southern California, they get zapped because it's too hot. Our ideal days would be sunny and March, type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure the past few days here in Michigan would have been really great for solar energy.
Yeah. I don't remember what Germany has a huge percentage of their electricity is. Annis, were you going to mention that? It's high, and Germany isn't any more sunny than we are.
No, it's a mistake to think that you need bright sunshine to generate solar power. I have a bunch of solar lights out in front of my house to mark my path, and they do fine. Any kind of light at all. I think Germany and the United States have a very, very similar climate. And as Karen says, if it's too sunny, you're not going to get the efficiency out of solar power that you want. I wondered if there were any questions amongst new people about how the bill that we are interested in Congress puts forward Katharine's ideas. Were there any? Yeah.
I did want to ask, you guys said that Canada is already doing this. Is there any other countries that we know of that are doing this as well? Or just Canada?
No. Catherine put up a map, I believe, at one point
Okay,
with
okay.
places that do, of across the world, that do have a carbon, definitely a carbon fee, a tax on carbon. One of them was Kazakhstan, and she mentioned the Ukraine.
Okay.
I mean, there are more and more places that are
I
doing
think
this.
South Korea was also one of the ones that was highlighted on her map too. Yeah.
Awesome.
And Canada does have that carbon fee with a dividend rebate to people, because I know it's been just a little over a year. They're doing it by province, and each province has their own specific legislation in Canada. And I know about a year ago, the Canadians, the people I know in Ontario were getting their rebate checks, and that was kind of exciting for them. So their system would be similar to what we've been doing, or what we're proposing.
One of the things that is interesting in a parallel to the pandemic, we've seen in the pandemic that money can be sent, however a bit inefficiently, to each American household. One of the bills, there are a number of carbon fee bills in Congress, where the one we're most interested in is called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. That returns the fees directly to each of you, to each American household, per adult and per child. And that has a social justice wing of it, because people whose bills will go up because of the fee, because the companies will naturally up their bills, will have a way to cover that increase in their fees. And other people will be receiving the dividends also. Everybody in America will receive the dividends.
So one thing that was just curious to me is that this keynote speech was a global speech. And I guess I was somewhat under the impression that, CCL was more of just within the United States, specifically because of the bill that we're trying to pass. So I guess I'd just like a little bit more information about the work that we're doing globally and how that interacts with what we're doing within the United States.
Citizens Climate Lobby started in the United States. It's probably been in only the last, it was 2007 it started, so it hasn't been around a totally long time. And yes, in the United States, we're interested in passing legislation that will put a fee on carbon, but our methodology is being used in other countries to whatever their type of government would be, to utilize our methodology of working respectfully with people from both bipartisanship and trying to find common ground to get whatever is needed in those countries, because obviously their governments operate not the same as us, but it is under the guise of using our methodology around the world. And that's only been, I don't know, I see Arlie's there, is Mary Dunn. Maybe she knows. I don't think we started getting a lot of international chapters until 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
We only started 5 years ago.
Right.
So it was after that.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Off the top of my head, I think CCL started really building up more international chapters within the last 5 years. But I agree with Karen. It's the same technique of respectability, working with everybody, building political will within your country. And Citizens Climate Lobby, when it hosts events now, frequently invites chapters from outside of the United States. So it's not unusual to see participants from other countries.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that it's very important to be, speaking up and lobbying about these issues now, especially when there's certain, there's just been so many setbacks with the EPA and regulations in the United States. So I feel like it's important to, as citizens, you know, spread the word about this act, and also just kind of be your own, you know, I don't know, warrior kind of.
And our chapter has people who, because our districts are very, the word is gerrymandered, I guess. We have 4 to 5 different representatives or districts that are represented in our chapter. And again, we do that lobbying, and we do research, and we try to get the constituents to give input to their representatives. And by doing, you know, the various levers I talked about, getting stuff out in the media. We had our lobby days, and I participated. My district has Haley Stevens as District 11, and she has not yet co-sponsored the bill, but we meet with her numerous times, or one of her staff members. We've been meeting with her energy and environmental staff person, and we talk about the bill, ask about what Haley's concerns are. We bring feedback from any constituents. One of the things that CCL has going right now is to sign up. Individuals can sign up to participate in a monthly phone call to their representative. And if I signed up via my cell phone, and so once a month, I'm assigned the 10th of the month, I get a text saying it's your day to call Haley, and here's a brief message you could give her. And I click the link, and I can get the phone number, and I can do it. So that's one way, because that is what we hear from some of our representatives, is this isn't of enough importance to their constituents, that they don't hear from them. For those of you, and so that's a very mindless way to get reminded. And if we have, you know, 15 people calling every month, that's 15 people they would not have heard from. And they vary the message to them a little bit. We did suspend that process during COVID because we knew they were overwhelmed. One of our other districts that we have a lot of members in is District 9, which is Andy Levin. And he did, I guess it was just this year, time flies here, he did co-sponsor the HR 763. He felt it fit in nicely with his desire for the Green New Deal, and that it actually gave a method to help achieve some of the goals in the Green New Deal. So locally, he has sponsored it. I don't know where everybody else is from. I know Ginny's Brenda Lawrence has also in District 14. Again, through our meetings with them, we go in with the goal of trying to get them to co-sponsor or sign on with the bill. The bill at this point is in committee, but those have all been suspended with the virus and then with some of this racism stuff. So hopefully they'll be getting back to that at some point. But that's what we as CCL do, is meet, again, plan a strategy, go in with information and requests from constituents to their offices. And you develop a relationship. I know prior to Haley Stevens being in District 11, it was Dave Trott, who was a Republican, who the first time we met with him, his first month or two in office, not even on my radar, I don't care about it, my constituents don't care about it. Well, close to 2 years later, he did end up co-sponsoring. And the respectful techniques that CCL talks to us about is his hot buttons were manufacturing jobs and national security. So we kept feeding him information as to how climate is impacted by that, and how something like a carbon fee and dividend could help overcome those things and level that stuff out. And to the point, so, you know, we were discouraged at our first meeting, but just said, okay. What other districts are people from at this meeting? Do you know?
Karen, so it's HR 763 that
Yeah.
we would write to our congressperson about.
Right. And I know in the chat, yeah, there is reference to that, to investigate it more. Yes.
I don't know if my representative is going to be, so, I mean, I'm in District 10 and I have Paul Mitchell.
Oh, yes.
Who is,
Yes.
yeah.
Where can you
We have
find out?
somebody on the call who's been the liaison or the lead person for Paul Mitchell, and it's been a difficult time with him, but we're hoping he's not running for re-election, so we're hoping
He's not.
Right.
He's
we're hoping there may be a slightly more amenable person. Where can I ask where you live, Mark?
I'm in Sterling Heights.
Oh, okay. It goes down into Sterling Heights.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story.
Okay.
It has to do with the gerrymandering.
Okay. Because I knew it was Shelby Township. I didn't realize it dipped below M59.
Yeah, there's a little story how Candace Miller got involved when she was in the office, and they kind of drew the line to include the little manufacturing sector that's down Van Dyke.
Okay.
And,
yeah. Are you on our mailing list, Mark?
I think so. I think that's how I heard about this.
Okay.
But,
all right.
I'll double check.
His email?
Sure.
Yeah, we should. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Paul Mitchell had, I know Charles can speak up, has not been real open to us, but.
No, I mean, I've written to him many times in the past, and it's never been a satisfactory.
We've not been able to get a chapter for that district or other constituents to go with us to meetings, etc., which, you know, doesn't make it as impactful. Charles, do you have something you want to say?
No, I mean, you told the story on Paul Mitchell. The only thing I was going to say was, did you go over the 5 levers, the 5 different ways that we use?
At the beginning, yes.
Yeah, okay, which are as important, the other 4 are as important as the direct lobbying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
just for anybody who's feeling timid about this, maybe that's not the right word, but unfamiliar, Citizens Climate Lobby, the website, citizensclimatelobby.org, has everything you need, right down to talking points, word by word. How, for example, what kinds of words to use to approach a legislator from a different party as yourself. Things like start with an affirmation and find out what their values are. There's more training in CCL, and I've worked for a number of different grassroots organizations and any of the organizations I've ever been to, and they're very cheerful about it. And if you do go lobbying, you will go with an experienced lobbyist the first time, and you can be a silent observer and get the idea of how it works. And I just have to say that it feels great. And I guess I feel about the Dave Trott thing. That was one of the best moments of my life when he finally came around after 4 years of politeness. And I'm not really a polite person.
Yeah, there are a lot of
resources.
And I also wanted to mention that there's also, I mean, CCL really tries to, I mean, it's a bipartisan effort, and so we try to work with both sides of the aisle. And I actually, for the, we had a national meeting earlier this month, and I attended a lot of the how to persuade more of the conservative mindsets on how to get on towards this bill. And there are like several different talking points to bring up to more, conservative leaders. And, there's like tons of jobs that would be created through this. You want to make sure you're responsible with, the world that we're living in. There's just a bunch that I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
I really like the point about the adjusted fee for anything that was imported. I forget how it's worded in the bill, but I think that's something that really sticks with conservatives too.
Border adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the border adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that somebody else can explain it better than me.
Likewise.
My understanding of it is that, the tax is on anything that's inside the United States. So one of the conservative hesitations might be that that could give encouragement for businesses to do business outside of the United States.
Mhm.
But the border adjustment makes it to where it does cost the same and they still have that tax if they go outside the United States. So, so from a conservative standpoint, there's definitely a lot of emphasis on keeping jobs in America and trying to keep the economy here in America. And I think bringing up the border adjustment is a really good point to say that it would continue to be a level playing field.
Mm-hmm. Come to a lobby. You're good.
Oh, we'll get Juliet somewhere.
I'll be there.
Yep. Any more discussion or questions?
I had a question if how CCL are you integrated with I think there's a congressional committee that's bipartisan that's working on basically climate solutions.
In the Senate or in the House?
There's one in both at this point. We were instrumental in getting the one in the House started in the last Congress, and it was a bipartisan committee, and so we ended up with 80 pairs of a Democrat, and because you had to join as one Republican and one Democrat, and they were looking at all solutions for climate issues, not just the one we were recommending. But I know some of our Washington people were instrumental in helping get that going. So yes, and again, figured we need to get Congress working on this issue, because prior to this, when our first iteration, the first iteration of 763 was introduced in the last Congress, and it was the first time there was a climate related bill that would actually do something. So, we're making progress. And then it was reintroduced early, again, maybe February of this past year. And there is now one of those bipartisan Congress in the Senate. And I know Debbie Stabenow has joined that. As one of our senators from Michigan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think this was I really enjoyed, discussing with everybody and showing the screening again. And yeah, if nobody else has any other questions or anything they'd like to say, I think we're about 15 minutes over. I think we'll wrap it up.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Annalisa and Matt, for putting this together.
And again, remind people of our meeting.
When is our next meeting?
Next meeting is the third Tuesday of every month. So July, let's see, that's July 21st at 6:30.
Yep.
And
if we have
be a Zoom meeting again.
Yeah, if we have your email, you should get an email. Otherwise, you can check that out on, Facebook or other social media.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First timers.
Yeah.
Glad to see you.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciated it. Happy to see everybody.
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks.